today on an all-new Dr. Phil.
Was an innocent man framed by law enforcement.
You may have seen Making a Murderer, but
you don't have the whole story.
Now, more exclusive interviews.
Does Avery think that his brothers have anything to do with it?
With Stephen Avery's ex-fiancée.
I hate to say this on air, but...
And his lawyer.
I was shocked to hear the sheriff say...
I'm hearing this for the first time.
The secret that was locked away.
He knew and did nothing about it.
What the sheriff admitted to Dr. Phil.
You have not spoken about this before. Why speak about it now? Let's do it.
Have a good show, everybody. Here we go.
This is a safe place to talk about hard things.
Stand by. We'll count you down.
I try to be an emotional compass and point you in the right direction.
5, 4.
I am not giving up on you. Last week, we started digging into Netflix's controversial and polarizing true crime series, Making a Murderer. It's the highly debated, engrossing, binge-worthy series that tells the story of Stephen Avery, who in 1985 was arrested and convicted of a brutal rape and sentenced to 32 years in prison. In 2003, after 18 long years, Avery walked free when DNA evidence exonerated him.
Stephen Avery walked out of prison a free man.
Students at UW-Madison worked through the Wisconsin Innocence Project to get the DNA testing that freed him.
But his freedom was fleeting. 2 years after walking out of prison, he was arrested again. This time for the murder of 25-year-old photographer Teresa Halbach.
Investigators now say they've not only found several pieces of evidence that prove Stephen Avery did kill Teresa Halbach, they say he tried to cover it all up.
What's interesting to note is that when he was arrested, Avery was embroiled in a $36 million civil lawsuit against the county for wrongful conviction.
Something in my gut said they're not done with him. Something's going to happen. They weren't going to hand that man $36 million.
Now, many believe law enforcement framed him in retaliation for suing, and in 2007, Avery was found guilty of murder and sentenced to life in prison, this time with no chance of parole. 53-year-old Stephen Avery has spent over 28 of the last 30 years in jail. Is he the unluckiest man in America? Or is he a calculated killer who's exactly where he should be? You'll see some of my exclusive interview with the man who arrested Stephen Avery 31 years ago for rape in 1985 and was the sheriff when Stephen Avery was arrested for murder in 2003. You'll hear more of that interview today, but first, here's what happened last time. I spoke with HLN's Nancy Grace. It was a heated conversation, to say the least. Take a look.
I'm telling you, Steve Avery is the real killer of Teresa Halbach. And I can't sit here and play the fiddle and the music and splice up film and pull at your heartstrings the way those two film students did to make you buy their line.
Jump back, Jack. You don't know what I think. I do think this was a very one-sided documentary.
When he called her that day, he star 67 his call to hide his identity. Blood in her car, 6 spots. Her DNA on a bullet in his garage.
Here's my problem with this whole thing. When you are talking about depriving someone of their liberty in America, that is an extremely high standard of proof. Law enforcement must not only avoid impropriety, they must avoid the appearance of impropriety.
Do I believe he's guilty? Yes, I do. Do I know about every prosecutor and cop? No, I don't. I don't have a dog in the fight, Dr. Phil. I don't have skin in the game. The nephew, Dassey, convicted of raping her, his confession fits perfectly with the forensic evidence.
This young man is obviously intellectually challenged.
Draw a picture of the bed and how she was tied down. Draw a big size so we can see it.
His lawyer allowed him to be interrogated not once, not twice, but 3 times. My point is that these people deserve to have a fair trial.
I agree.
And if at the fair trial they are convicted, put the son of a bitches under the jail. I promised that we'd go beyond the documentary series and dig deep into both sides of this controversial case. Joining me now is one of Avery's defense attorneys, Dean Strang. He was featured prominently in the documentary and is convinced Steven Avery is an innocent man. Dean, thank you for joining us this morning. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me.
Your theory that you were advancing was that the police department may have planted evidence that suggested that Steven Avery was guilty of this crime, and that could not have been a very popular assertion at that time. Did you feel like that was going to be a tough sell before you started?
You do in any case that gets pervasive inflammatory pretrial publicity, as this one did. I mean, this just was a very high-profile case, not just because it was a murder in a relatively small rural county, but because of Steven Avery's backstory, someone who'd spent 18 years in prison for a rape that he did not commit, was exonerated, and then was charged again just over 2 years later with an even more serious crime.
Let's face it, conspiracy theories, planting evidence by police, that type thing is a tough sell because people know it has to involve oftentimes a lot of different people, and folks think somebody's going to crack, somebody's going to rat out their co-conspirators, somebody's going to say something. Did you feel like this was a Hail Mary, or did you think you had a legitimate shot at selling this to the jury?
You know, I didn't step back at the outset and say, what are the prospects for this winning? What I did say is, this is what the case presents me. This is what my client has to say about it, and you know, we worked from there.
I spoke to retired Manitowoc Sheriff Kenneth Peterson about his easier to kill him quote that has people in an uproar even to this day. And I'd like you to take a look at what was said. Did you also say there's no way we framed Steven Avery? It would have been a whole lot easier to just kill him than to frame him?
Yes.
Do you think that was a reasonable thing for the sheriff to say about a defendant on trial?
It was a weak moment, you know, frustrating time.
You had no intention of having Steven Avery killed at any point?
No, I did not.
Yeah, I can predict your answer. I just wanted to give you a chance to clear up in case anybody had any doubts.
Over a period of time, he kept saying, you know, he was being framed, he was being set up, you know, and it was on and on and on. And finally, you just get to the point where you feel like you got to defend yourself in your department. And frankly, it would have been easier to eliminate him than it would have been to kill Teresa. And why would you want to kill an innocent person?
What did you think when you heard that then, and when you hear him saying it still yet today?
You know, at the time, Steven Avery was presumptively innocent. I also recognize that Mr. Peterson is human. He was, no doubt, working under enormous stress, public attention, scrutiny. These are the kinds of unpredictable human mistakes that we all make. I'm not going to comment on his motives. I don't know what his line of thinking is.
Have you ever heard another law enforcement official make a statement like that?
No, I haven't.
I asked him point blank if he had anything to do with the murder whatsoever, and he looked at me and he said,
and later, you have not spoken about this before. Why speak about it now?
what the sheriff admitted.
I was shocked to hear him say,
I'm hearing this for the first time.
Tomorrow on an all-new Dr. Phil.
My wife and I are raising our granddaughter.
If you consider putting a child to bed and taking her to school, raising her, then okay.
Is she choosing her boyfriend?
You go live with him and leave your daughter there.
Over her daughter.
She needs to be a mother.
How am I stopping her from being a mother?
I give my child a bath, feed her sometimes.
In whose home?
If I did have my own home, I would be doing that myself.
But you don't.
That's tomorrow.
Well, if you haven't seen it yourself, there is at least a good chance that you have a friend who has been talking about a new show called Making a Murderer.
Making a Murderer has reignited interest in a crime that vanished from the public spotlight.
The documentary makes the case that a man serving life in prison is actually innocent.
Hundreds of thousands of people are calling for the pardon of a convicted killer after the Netflix series Making a Murderer exposed possible flaws in the case that put him behind bars. Now, the show's producers say the legal system failed. So, could this convict soon be free?
We're back. We've been talking about Making a Murderer, which has a lot of people in America talking. It deals with whether or not Steven Avery and Brendan Dassey are where they belong. Dean, I'd like you to respond to one other thing that I learned for the first time. Take a look. Do you recall the report that Sergeant Colburn made in regards to a phone call that he received in 1995?
I remember something vaguely about a phone call, but I don't know the particulars now.
Well, it's reported in the documentary, and I think sources have been pretty clear about this afterwards, that Colburn said that in 1995, he received a phone call that there was someone in custody that said they were guilty of committing a crime for whom someone else was currently serving time. It was pretty clear that they were referring to Steven Avery. Do you recall anything about that?
I don't know what happened with that phone call. That should have been or would have been directed to the sheriff at the time.
Okay, I think this clip will refresh your memory.
Well, Steven Avery is sitting in prison now for a decade. A telephone call comes in to the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department saying that they had someone in custody who said that he had committed an assault in Manitowoc, and an assault for which somebody was currently in prison.
What that person in custody had said was that he had committed an assault in Manitowoc County and someone else was in jail for it, correct?
Yes, sir.
Manitowoc doesn't have huge numbers of major assaults where people go to prison, and certainly where people would still be in prison. There is a very distinct possibility, I would say likelihood, that it's Gregory Allen, it's the Brown County Sheriff's Department that is in 1995 on the Gregory Allen case, that Gregory Allen has said something about Steven Avery, and at a minimum, somebody ought to check this out.
I mean, that's a significant event.
Right, that's what stood out in my mind.
The fellow who got that call is named Colburn, and you might say that there should be a record of him immediately making a report on this. There might be a record of his immediately contacting a supervising officer. There might be a record of him contacting a detective who handles sexual assault cases. There might be some record of it. But if you thought any of those things, you'd be wrong, because there isn't any record in 1995, 1996, 1997, 1998, 1999, 2000, 2001, 2002, 2003. Now, 2003 is a year that has meaning because that's when Steven Avery got out. And the day he got out, or the day after, that's when Colburn decides to contact his superior officer named Link. And Link tells him to write a report. And they then go have contact with the sheriff. Now, let's just stop and think about that for a minute. Why does that happen? I think the answer is pretty clearly, these people realized that they had screwed up big time. Colburn realized it, Link as his superior realized it, and the sheriff realized it. So Link tells Colburn to write a report. The sheriff tells Link, get me the report. The sheriff puts the report in a safe. That's how much he cares about documenting this thing.
Did you put that report in a safe, or was that the other sheriff that put it in the safe?
That would have been Sheriff Kasurk.
Uh-huh. You know, I think people are listening to that and looking at that and saying, if he got that call in 95 and sat on that, that doesn't sound right, does it?
No, doesn't sound right.
I think that's a big part of the reason that they're saying that they're trying to make the case that department in Manitowoc County had an agenda and was not being forthcoming with what could have been exculpatory evidence as far back as 1995, and therefore are very suspicious of the politics of that department at the time of the second crime and investigation. This came out in 03 at the time that he was released, and Sheriff Kasurk retired in 01.
Okay.
So were you not the sheriff in 03?
Yes.
So wasn't that report handed to you and put in the safe by you and not Kasurk, who retired 2 years earlier?
No, I never had a report on any of that.
So you never put anything in a safe?
No, I was never given a report. I'm not saying there couldn't have been a report in the safe. That could have been put in there anytime. That could have gone in 95.
Okay, but if you're sitting on the defense side for Steven Avery and you're finding out a call came in 95, was not investigated, was not reported until 03, and when reported in 03, was just put in a safe and again not reported, then you might understand why they would be very suspicious of that department regarding this murder investigation.
I don't remember anything in 03. I remember him talking about it in 95, but he didn't talk to me about it. It would have been more than likely Jean Couché and or Sheriff Tom Kasurk.
You remember hearing about the call back in 1995?
Yes.
So you knew the call came in 1995?
Yes.
So you didn't receive the call, but you knew about the call in 95, so why would you not say, we need to follow this up, let's do some more investigation?
In 03.
In 95. You said you knew about the call in 95.
Yes, that would have been up to the investigative unit at the time, and that would have been Jean Couché.
Well, but two of you knew about it in 95. Colburn and you knew about it in 95 from Brown County.
I believe so. I don't know where it was from. I have no idea.
I was shocked to hear him say that he knew about the call in 95 and did nothing about it. Where does this end? I mean, he knew about the call.
I don't know. I'm hearing this for the first time right now, too. And it is upsetting. You know, the segmentation of roles that you see in any criminal justice institution can lead to everybody saying, not my problem, or yesterday's news, or that crime is solved. And this is extraordinarily unfortunate, but it illustrates yet another breakdown that can happen through a combination of institutional hubris, dislike or bias, suspicion, preformed conclusions about somebody, and the sense that it's just not my problem. I wish this sort of thing didn't happen, but we know that it does.
Well, you know, here's my problem with this, having spent most of my professional career in the litigation system. We've got Peterson was the arresting officer in 85. He's the sheriff at the time that he is arrested for the Halbach murder. We find out now that he knew about this call that came in 95. He says someone else was sheriff in 03. He was sheriff in 03. I mean, come on. This is why people lose confidence in law enforcement. And depriving someone of their liberty in America is the highest standard of proof that we have, as well it should be. We'll be right back. Who do you think killed this woman?
The
the transformation from Steven Avery as wronged victim of a miscarriage of justice to Steven Avery, the horrendous murderer of an innocent young woman, was breathtaking. It left me stunned. The absence of any serious commentary that the presumption of innocence that he enjoys may in fact be valid, that there should not be a rush to judgment. I thought it was just awesome how endangered he is as an accused.
Who do you think killed this woman?
I don't know, and we may never know. I remain deeply concerned that it wasn't Steven Avery. And one of the larger systemic issues this film, I think, poses for us and allows all intelligent viewers to answer is, what do we do in the face of uncertainty? Do we err on the side of taking someone's liberty away? Do we err on the side of allowing them to go on and live with their liberty? I think in very rare instances that may be true. In most criminal cases, and when I say most, something probably north of 98% of them, we don't get anything like scientific certainty in a courtroom. And so we have to figure out, what do we do with uncertainty?
Mm-hmm. When was the last time you spoke to Steven Avery?
The day before this documentary came out. Jerry Buden and I went and visited him in prison the day before, knowing that he never would have a chance to see the documentary, at least while he's in prison. We wanted to make sure that he was aware that it was coming, and, you know, what he might expect.
Mm-hmm. Was it a close call to not put him on the stand during the trial?
That's not fair for me to answer that question. It's a fair question, but a lawyer can't fairly answer that. I would be disclosing conversations with Steven and Jerry that Steven and any other American charged with a crime has every right to demand that his lawyer not disclose on TV or across a dinner table or anywhere else. And I'm going to keep that confidence.
Yeah. Well, Peterson told me that he believed that if Avery was acquitted, or if he got out now, that he would murder again. So obviously some people in that county think he is guilty. Look, out of respect for your time, I see by the clock on the wall I need to let you go, because I know you have another commitment, and I really appreciate you joining us. So thank you very much for talking to us. When we come back, we're going to talk to a reporter who interviewed Steven Avery just days after Teresa Halbach was declared a missing person. According to her, the interview was uneventful, but she said little did she know she was standing on some of Halbach's burned remains when she was conducting that interview.
If you actually read the record of what happened, multiple witnesses say that he doused the cat in gasoline and oil, held it down, placed it in the fire, and wouldn't allow it to get out, and enjoyed watching it burn.
We're back. We've been talking about making a murderer. Ready to join the conversation is Diana Alvear, who used to be a local reporter covering the Steven Avery trial. Now she actively blogs about the documentary and has been catching some heat for calling the documentary biased and misleading. So, Diana, thank you for being here. What's your biggest problem with this documentary?
To me, it was very significant, the incident with the cat. In the documentary, you hear Steven Avery say it was a mistake, when in reality, if you actually read the record of what happened, multiple witnesses say that he doused the cat in gasoline and oil, held it down, placed it in the fire, and wouldn't allow it to get out, and enjoyed watching it burn. So that's very different than calling something a mistake. That was just the first episode. Anybody who's watching this series, I totally get it. I get why you're riveted. I get why you're angry. I get why you're frustrated. But the truth is that you don't have the whole story. Now, I was on the story from the night that Teresa Halbach was declared a missing person. When you live through this, and believe me, it wasn't easy, and then to watch this series and say, this is not the full story. It was very frustrating for me. You walk away from that series feeling as though Teresa Halbach and Steven Avery didn't know each other, and they did. And that's, to me, a very crucial piece of evidence in terms of how you view him from here on out once he is charged. Because the truth of the matter is, he knew who she was. He asked for her by name. And these are the kinds of things that if you're sitting in that jury box and you know that, that's going to stay in your mind.
Do you think it would be a waste of time to retry this case?
Oof, I'm going to leave that to the legal experts. You know, the reason that I'm catching heat now is because I wrote an essay that essentially said, don't forget the true victim in this case. She's not a plot device. This young woman was 25 years old. Teresa Halbach was a loving daughter and sister. She was active in her local church. She was a really good person. And I don't think that this series does its due by her. One of the most traumatic things about this whole thing for me was that if you watch the series, there's a reporter standing next to Steven Avery and the red van at night. That's me. I went out there and I talked to him. This was before he was charged. He was just a person of interest, someone who was one of the last known people to have seen her. He's like, yeah, this is the van, and I don't know where she went. Maybe she ran away. That's what he kept telling me. Maybe she ran away. And then later on, after the salvage yard had been declared a crime scene, of course, I was back there all the time, and they had these little flags. And I asked one of the cops, what are the flags for? And they said, well, that's where they found her remains, right where I'd been standing, you know. And so this one woman, I mentioned that in my essay, and she said, well, clearly you're lying because, you know, I watched Making a Murderer, and her remains were found in the burn barrel, and you were nowhere near. And I'm sitting here going, okay, so I'm lying now. I'm making it up. I mean, come on. I mean, think about it. I want people to have the whole story. I want them to know what was truly presented, both by the defense and the prosecution. Because until then, you cannot make up your mind. And I'm with you. I mean, I think justice needs to be done.
Yeah, and 99.9% of the people won't do what I did, which is go get the trial transcripts and read the actual, that's where the facts came from.
I just want to urge you, absolutely, you can watch whatever you want. You're absolutely entitled to your own opinion. But just bear in mind that you're seeing a very one-sided, biased perspective. They presented the Avery's perspective. And I would really love to see something from the Halbach's perspective. I would love to see, you know, something that balances it out. This, by far, has been the most balanced presentation I've seen so far.
That's what we strive to do. I mentioned earlier that I would share my conversation with Avery's ex-fiancée, Sandra Greenman, with you. That's next. We'll be right back. Would you feel safe living alone with this man?
I would feel perfectly safe with him.
Is that what the two of you plan to do?
I hate to say this on air, but...
Tomorrow on an all-new Dr. Phil.
You go live with your boyfriend and leave your parents raising your daughter.
If you consider putting a child to bed and taking her to school, raising her.
That's tomorrow.
I spoke to Avery's ex-fiancée, Sandra Greenman. Here's what she had to say about the last time she talked to Steven. Thank you so much for taking time to chat with me.
Anything that will help the situation.
You 100% believe that Steven Avery is innocent of the charges that he's in jail for today, correct?
Absolutely. I asked him point blank if he had anything to do with the murder whatsoever. And he looked at me and he said I had absolutely nothing to do with this murder. I personally believe with all my heart that he's innocent, that he did not do this. The evidence, yes, some of it does look suspicious, but when you break the evidence down, you will see that it isn't. I can't stress enough that he just doesn't have the makeup to do something like that. He just doesn't. He's gentle. He's not this violent monster that the media and everything else has made him out to be. He just isn't.
You watched the trial, and then you reached out to him in jail, correct?
Yes, I did. It just seemed like this was something that I needed to do. I needed to show him that I was behind him. I just needed to write to him, and then he did write back a couple of letters. And then when he went to Boscoville to prison, I had never been in a prison. I was scared to death to go in that prison. And I was afraid I wouldn't have anything to say to the man for 3 hours. I thought, well, I don't know him. What are we going to talk about? And it was wonderful. 3 hours just went by like that. And it just blossomed into a good friendship. And then it was more than that.
What do you think he believes is his biggest obstacle to overcome in getting a new trial?
Well, we need new evidence. New testing done on especially the blood in the vehicle.
Right.
That was never tested by the defense, only the prosecution.
Does he think that his brothers, Chuck and Earl, have anything to do with it?
Nope. We talked about that very thing. And he said, I know Chuck and Earl had nothing to do with it. I know that. And I said, how do you know that? And he said, because they were around the yard when I was. He was lashing out because they didn't come to see him. They seemed to just disown him because this happened, and I think he just wanted to lash out.
Regarding the case, you did have a meeting with his lawyer. What can you tell us about that?
I think Mrs. Zellner is absolutely terrific. She says that she is going to get him off, and I know that she has a plan. And there's no way that man should not get another trial, another chance.
Okay, and at this point, all appeals are at the federal level, correct?
Yes.
Is there a timeline at which this appeal can be filed?
It's about a month, I believe, but I believe she can ask for an extension.
Is this something that he is actively participating in with her?
Yes. They had a wonderful conversation, I understand. 2 hours or more that she was at the prison, and she liked him and he liked her, and that's what counts.
Sandy, I've heard him say that if he was out, if he was able to get out, he would love to go off and live in the woods and, just kind of be, away from everything and just kind of be private. Would you feel safe to load up, go off into the woods, and be living alone with this man, with nobody else around, just the two of you? Would you feel safe to live with him?
I would feel perfectly safe with him. I just can't stress it enough. I just can't see a violent side to him. I just can't. And it's been 10 years, and I haven't seen it yet.
Is that what the two of you plan to do if he is released?
That had been our plan. However, I have broken the engagement. I hate to say this on air, but I did, and it had nothing to do with the case whatsoever. It was a personal issue that I can't get into, and we don't know what will happen when he gets out. And I say when because I have every hope that he will be released someday.
And I won't violate your privacy about this, but I understand it had to do with some ideological things, and this would be nothing that has to do with anything that involves the case whatsoever.
Not a bit.
Okay.
No.
I want to be clear about that. I don't want to push you into talking about something you don't want to, but I want to be clear that it had nothing to do with the facts of the case.
Not one bit. No.
Okay. And what's his reaction to the fact that America has taken up this cause? I think that at this point, I think there's over 300,000 people have signed petitions asking for his release or retrial. Right. What's his reaction to that?
Oh, he loves it. He's very happy. When you get a little depressed, when you think you hear the word deny all the time, and he'd heard that so much, and whatever he had tried, it was a big deny. And now there's hope, and there's people behind him. He has to have all the hope in the world now that he didn't have before, and just knowing that people care enough to write letters and say, we don't believe you're guilty.
Well, Sandy, thanks for talking to me this morning.
Oh, I'd appreciate that so much.
You've been a delight to talk to, Sandy. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So long.
Bye now.
Okay. Next, the latest from Steven Avery's new legal team when we come back. What was your involvement in the department at the time of the murder investigation?
I was the one that decided that we would have Calumet County take the lead on the investigation because of the pending lawsuit.
You believe Avery's where he belongs? Sheriff of Manitowoc County is Robert Herman. He says the negative attention his town is receiving because of making a murderer is upsetting and unbelievable. Take a look.
Manitowoc County Sheriff Robert Herman has spent his career in this department, a once tranquil Lake Michigan harbor town. In the middle of a firestorm now, unlike any this city of 30,000 has ever seen.
I'm calling from California. I live in the state of New York. You should resign.
For the past 3 weeks, they are the voices.
Murderer. You're a f***ing murderer.
He's heard each morning.
Hope you go to hell. Merry Christmas. Have a great day.
They're coming from all over, Germany, Australia. I think it really sheds a negative light on this area.
Sheriff Herman says a list of key evidence against Avery never made it on screen.
To plant evidence or try and frame somebody, it's just absurd.
You guys are the most crookedest f***ing law enforcement in all of Wisconsin.
Joining us now is current Sheriff of Manitowoc County, and that is Sheriff Robert Herman. Sheriff, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
What was your involvement in the department at the time of the murder investigation?
I was would have been the undersheriff at that time, and actually was the one that decided that we would have Calumet County take the lead on the investigation because of the pending lawsuit.
Right. It seemed to me like it was a really good decision to have another county come in and take the lead on the investigation, because obviously then there's no questions, right? You're avoiding the appearance of impropriety.
That's correct. That was our motive. And hindsight 2020, had we known that the defense's main defense would have been the planting evidence theory, there's no question we would have been better off not being involved at all.
You believe Avery's where he belongs?
I do. I believe justice was served. You know, I believe in our judicial system. I think we have one of the finest in the country.
Well, here's what former Sheriff Peterson said when we asked him what advice he had for Stephen Avery's new attorney. What message do you have for Avery's new lawyer?
I believe if you're going to get the case reopened, you're going to have to find new evidence. But I don't think any exists.
Do you think there is any new evidence out there?
I guess that's always possible. I don't believe there's any out there, but this was a crime scene that it was over a 40-acre parcel, and there were license plates found in a vehicle out there. Teresa's Hallbach was found a ways away. Different bone fragments were found in different areas. So to say that every piece of evidence was picked up in this case, I really can't say that.
Well, I appreciate you talking to us today. Listen, guys, if you have an opinion about this case, then sign a petition. Write your congressman, write the Department of Justice, write the governor in Wisconsin. Do whatever you want to do, but don't harass these people at the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department, because I tell you what, those phone lines need to be open. They need to be available, because if something happens where you need them or your neighbors need them, they don't need to be tied up with ridiculous, harassing phone calls to people that actually weren't involved in the case to begin with. So please leave these folks alone. So, Sheriff, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next, the latest from Stephen Avery's new legal team when we come back. Closed captioning provided by...
If you have high blood pressure like I do, many cold medicines may raise your blood pressure. Coricidin HBP relieves cold symptoms without raising blood pressure. Coricidin HBP.
Want to know what's coming up on Dr. Phil? Visit our website and subscribe to our email newsletter. You'll get weekly updates, life strategies, and exclusive video that you won't find anywhere else.
Plus, on drphil.com, you can see sneak previews of upcoming shows. Log on today.
Well, I want to bring you up to date on a few things that have happening. First, I have a statement from Stephen Avery's current lawyer. We invited her to be on today's show, and She declined, but we received this statement. Ms. Zellner will not be able to be doing any interviews about Steven Avery's case at this time. We are continuing to examine every aspect of Mr. Avery's case and all of his legal options. We are confident Mr. Avery's conviction will be vacated when we present the new evidence and results of our work to the appropriate court. Sincerely, Kathleen T. Zellner. What has happened just while we have been out here doing this show is they have filed a motion to get Avery released on bond from his current imprisonment. It has not been ruled on, but they have made a motion to have him released on bond pending the appeal and new case. Now, everybody wants to know what my thoughts are on this. When you have a young man like Brendan Dassey and his own lawyer is cooperating with the prosecution, it just means that you've muddied the waters here. And I think that is a very slippery slope. If you think these people are guilty, then try them and do it with a clean record. Just try them with a clean record and use the evidence that's there, get your conviction, let the jury determine what should be done, and go forward. And I think depriving someone of their liberty in America should be a very high standard, should be a very steep hill to climb. And I just think they need to do it right. And that's what bothers me here. And I think we need to hold ourselves to a very high standard. So that's my opinion. I want to thank all of my guests, Dean Strang, Robert Herman, Nancy Grace, Emily Matesic, Kenneth Peterson, Diana Alvear, and Sandra Greenman. And a special thanks to Netflix. If you haven't seen Making a Murderer, it's certainly thought-provoking. Check it out. We'll see you next time. Thanks, guys.